Welcome to a shot between the reels. My name is Dan, and over this side,
My name is Brendan.
here he is. It's Brendan. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me, Dan. I'm excited to get into this evening.
It's an exciting one tonight. I am ready for it, I have to say. I'm ready to talk about this film. Um, what have you been watching lately, Brendan? I'm just going to throw that question quickly at you. Have you been watching anything
uh,
fun? Anything that you've enjoyed?
at the moment, I'm steadily making my way through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I
Okay.
am quite enjoying, I have to say. It's good. I think the last one I watched was Doctor Strange, which again,
Ooh,
I
I loved it,
thoroughly
Doctor
enjoyed
Strange.
upon
So,
repeat.
tell me, Brendan, what did you give it out of 5?
I gave it 4.5 stars.
Good man. Good man. Okay, I think I'm a 4.5 star man on Doctor Strange,
Yeah.
and I really like that film. Um,
What about you, Dan? What have you been watching?
so recently, I have been with the wife rewatching Lord of the Rings extended edition on Blu-ray.
I
So
love it.
we are 2/3 of the way through. So we are about to start at some point soon. Return of the King. And it's just a pleasure to watch, isn't it? It's like welcoming an old friend into your house, isn't it? And just
Yeah,
having a great chat because it's just like so much fun to be with those characters. Some classic lines of dialogue, and
definitely.
the number of times that Nat and I are just like going, "Oh, I love this bit," or "Oh, this bit's mental," or "This bit of dialogue is so funny," or whatever, just so many moments we stop and go, "Oh, this is crazy,"
It's
because it
I
is.
think it's mad how much time has passed on those films, and
I
they
know.
still hold up so well. It's
Right, let me tell you something, Brendan.
yeah.
Okay, so I think Two Towers is the best one. Okay, what do you
Yep.
think? Yeah, probably.
I really like Two Towers.
Okay,
It's very good. Yeah.
so what film won the Oscar that year for Best Picture? It wasn't Two Towers.
I can't even think what else would have come out in that year. I didn't go on.
Chicago.
Oh my word!
now, now, I okay. I see. I haven't actually sat and watched that film properly myself, but I have seen the stage show, and no,
I mean, I have watched Chicago, and it's safe to say one film sticks in my mind and the other one does not.
excellent,
I mean,
excellent.
I have no. That is baffling. That's truly baffling. But
Yeah. So Brennan's got no memory of that, even though the ladies are pretty much scantily clad for most of the film. He still can't remember it.
yeah, but the film isn't scored by Howard Shore, and that makes all the difference.
That is true. The music in Lord of the Rings is just like next level. So good. To be honest, I just keep going around the house, just start humming it. It's great. I love it. So
Yeah.
let's get into our feature film for the evening, our frank discussion. Um, Brendan, tell us what film we are looking at tonight.
Tonight we will be talking about Christopher Nolan's The Prestige.
So good. The Prestige, Christopher Nolan. It's so good, this film. It's so good. How much did you enjoy watching this?
Honestly, every time, if someone was just to suggest this off the bat, even if I literally just finished it and someone said, let's watch it again, I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch it again.
Yeah,
I love this film. I really love it.
yeah,
And it's a great one to discuss because there's so many like different things that you can
yeah.
talk about. I think what I love about films like this is it immediately incites conversation after you've finished it. You're like,
Yeah.
you have a moment to just breathe, and then you say, right, I'm ready to talk. I just want to talk about it because it's great. It's
Yeah,
really great.
100%.
Yeah.
100% agree. There's so much to it. Um, where shall we start? We'll start with our reviews, or our star ratings, even.
Yeah.
Um, how long did you deliberate over your star rating, Brendan? If you would first
Honestly,
ask you.
as I was watching back through, because it already recorded my star rating from the last time that I watched it, and I I went in thinking, I'm fully prepared to change my star rating if I feel any different about this film. But Dan, it is safe to say this is still thoroughly a 5-star film for me.
Yeah, very good, very good. And likewise, my rating when I went to log this film on Letterboxd, it was already on there because I'd already done it. I'd already seen it fairly recently, I guess. And yeah, mine has not changed either. It is still 5 stars. Um, it's probably been a while actually since I watched it because I'd had the joy of remembering obviously the key plot points, but I'd forgotten kind of enough for it to just be like, oh yes, oh yeah, I remember this, like, and just having that thrill of watching the film
Yeah.
and seeing those characters kind of interact and how the story unfolds. And yes, so where shall we begin? Um, let's just talk about the story as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think we'll just get into it. If you haven't seen this film, stop this right now. Prioritize watching the film because it's so good.
Yeah.
Come back and join our discussion.
Yeah.
So, Brendan, tell us about the story.
So yes, your general premise is that you've got the two main characters that you're following. So you have Robert Angier, who's played by Hugh Jackman, and then you have Alfred Borden, who is played by Christian Bale. And the general idea is you also kind of have, some of the key characters that are coming in, and they are moving the story along. But for the most part, it's just these two that you're kind of following, and you're getting a good slice of voiceover really that essentially is leading you through their story as well. And
Yeah.
in classic Christopher Nolan style, we have a lot of time jumps. So we're moving through their story, not necessarily in chronological order. It is progressing through the story, but you get bits at the end, at the beginning, and vice versa. It kind of switches throughout, and there's lots of callback moments. But the general crux of the story is those two magicians are in a rivalry over the death of Hugh Jackman's wife at the beginning of his character's wife at the beginning of the film. That happens, and then he is essentially feels like he owes him one. He wants to get him back for it. He's saying, well, you did this to me, so I need to kind of destroy him from the inside, which he's forever trying to do. But each magician really has their own demons that they're grappling with as we're going through.
Yeah.
So it's not a heartwarming tale.
No, if you want a feel-good film, go watch something else. It's not that at all. It's not a feel-good one, but it gets the brain working, and it's a thrill, I think. Yes. So before we get any further, how did you watch this film? May I ask?
So,
I just want to check you didn't watch it on Amazon Prime.
What? I may have.
Okay, so I started watching it on Amazon Prime the other day, purely because it was a bit lazy. I was in the lounge. I knew there was a Blu-ray already in my machine, and I couldn't be bothered to go to the other room and get the Prestige Blu-ray out. So I thought that's fine. I'll just get the old Amazon Prime up and I'll watch it on there because I knew it was on there.
Mm-hmm.
It started and I was like, "This ain't right. This don't look right." And the aspect ratio had been like they'd done the old classic where you normally have like the black bits either side and it's a nice widescreen image. Amazon Prime had chopped off the black bits and zoomed in, so you lost a bit of the edges.
Oh, wow.
So I after about 90 seconds, I stopped it, went and got the Blu-ray, popped the Blu-ray in. And it was proper widescreen then, and I actually could see everything that they had filmed and intended for me to see.
Interesting.
Can you imagine if Christopher Nolan knew that on Amazon Prime, that's how they were showing his film?
He'd be marching down to headquarters right now
I
wearing a
know, he'd be
Canadian
straight on
flag.
the phone, wouldn't he? What's that guy who runs Amazon, Jeff Bezos? He'd be like, get me his number.
I don't care if he's the richest man in the world. He
Does
answers
he
to
know who
me.
I am? Pulling my film off Amazon Prime. Yeah. Anyway, so I watched it. I've got it here.
Oh,
Prestige.
look at that. I just happen to have this one
I
from
know. I thought I'd leave it out just because I thought. I thought the tagline on the front was interesting. A friendship that became a rivalry that turned deadly. Now, at no point did I actually think that these two were friends. I think they were rivals
Well,
straight
the
off the bat.
strange thing about that is it's implied, isn't it? So at the beginning of the film, they have moments where they kind of joust with each other, I suppose, a little bit
Yeah,
effectively, and they're kind of putting small digs. But it's for such a small amount of time that they're like that.
yeah,
You never really get the impression that they're friends, more that they
no,
just work together and they know
yeah.
each other very well.
And they both have this a similar ambition,
Mm.
and that's kind of part of where the rivalry comes in. Obviously, there's the issue with Angier's wife
Yes.
drowning,
Yeah.
and was it Borden's fault? He couldn't remember, and that's where the tension kind of really kind of comes from between the two of them. Now, I think, where do we start here? Hugh and Christian are brilliant in this
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
Both of them have really interesting roles for different reasons. So, obviously, spoiler alert, Christian Bale is playing two versions of a character, but for most of the film, you don't know. You don't know that.
No.
And there's an element that they're both acting to be one person,
Yeah.
which is a bit of a mind bender when you start going, okay, so
I think
he's acting as if he's twin two,
yes.
but even when he's acting as twin one, they're both acting to be one character.
To be
Uh,
one person, yes, because they're trying to essentially. So he's essentially trying to be one person, but
yeah,
with shades of the other person's personality thrown in at times.
yeah, and there are obviously moments as the film progresses where each of those twins start to come out in different scenes, and
And I
the
think
wife,
I
yeah,
love that personally. I don't know if
yeah,
you felt, but watching it, knowing it,
yeah.
I almost get a bit more joy out of that film because I'm like trying to say, you're saying, well,
Which
that's
one?
obviously that
Yeah,
character now, and that's a different character. I mean, I think it deliberately becomes more obvious as time goes on,
yeah,
but in less obvious places, you're like, well, who was in control? Who was like in control
yeah.
of him at this particular
It's very good, isn't it?
point?
Very good.
And also it like alludes to it from the straight diving point of the film starts because it says when he talks about Cutter, so Michael Caine's character is saying you need to go down to this theater
Yeah,
and see this guy work, and they talk about him being the act. This
yeah.
is the act.
This is the act. Yeah,
He's this person all the time.
yeah,
He
and he
lives
spots it
this life.
straight away because he is that.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
can't, and like even at that point, Hugh Jackman can't get over the idea. He doesn't,
no,
he can't grasp it, can he? And yet, like Borden is living that life already. He's
yeah,
like, he's fully
yeah.
in that mindset, which
And
is
it's interesting how Borden. There's a time where he clearly knows that this trick is going to come, and that he will have his moment, but he's holding off, isn't he? He's kind of waiting for the perfect moment, and it comes along eventually, almost forced out of hand, where he kind of has to do a trick for them to have money,
yeah,
and for him to be a success. They need to put he needs to pay the bills and put bread on the table.
yeah,
Um, and it's an interesting duality with the two characters because you have Borden, who is clearly poor, and on
yeah,
the other hand, Angiers, we know that that's not his real name. We find that out fairly early on,
Yes, yeah.
um, and that well, obviously when he goes to America, we know that money isn't an issue. So they're polar opposites in many ways, but they're trying for the same ambition.
Mm.
Um, so I love some of that duality stuff. How you have these two characters, both failing in their relationships for
Yeah,
different
yeah,
reasons.
yeah.
Both of them are their ambition, and it's actually the obsession of it. They talk about obsession as a young man's game. That's what Cutter says.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, really interesting. I love how we can kind of see how obsession plays out. When you take it to the extremes, and it's a life and death thing, isn't it? That you're
yeah.
willing to kill, you're willing to take another man's life, because actually that's what the obsession drives you to. You
Well,
cannot be
it's
the
it's the
loser.
darkest. It's all of it, isn't it? It's the darkest side of their world,
Yeah,
of this magic world and especially because of what happened, the tragedy that happens at the beginning of the film.
yeah,
Angie is always kind of chasing it, and he doesn't want to believe that there's a simple reason why his trick just works. He
yeah,
wants to be better than him, even though in reality, I think he knows that Cutter is right, that he's using a double, but
yeah.
he doesn't want to believe it. He wants to
No,
believe there's something else happening, and he'll
no,
do
that's true. But
they'll do almost
even
anything to
yeah,
hurt one another. Like
yeah. But then they know, like it's I think it's Olivia Scarlett Johansson's character. Even she's like, well, it can't be a double because of the glove or whatever that he's wearing.
yeah,
She's like, it's the same person, and that's enough to sort of like seal the doubt that Angiers has. Um, and it's interesting. I don't know how much Borden kind of sets him up with Tesla, because obviously we know that he gives him that keyword to the book,
yeah.
and kind of is he just trying to get rid of him, or what? It's clear that obviously Borden, well, even if he could like be in touch with Tesla, there's no way he could afford to to get him to pay for a machine like that. So
I
uh,
think he does it as a way
get him
to
out of the
try
picture
to
almost.
get him gone, isn't it? Like to
Yeah,
get him out of the picture, and he can kind of be the dominant force in that
yeah.
world while he's not there.
While he's not there, yeah.
And he sends him off like spending all this money for what he believes will do
Could
absolutely
be, yeah, 100%. I mean,
what he doesn't bargain for is that he does do something.
yeah, and I've got to say that character of Tesla by David Bowie is amazing.
Yeah,
He's so good. But I'd actually say that Andy Serkis kind of steals those scenes
he's great.
because he's just so good. So good. I actually forgot he was in this. I was
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, Andy Serkis.
yeah.
He is just next level. Um,
I mean, he's great. I think it's a
yeah,
good. I think he's actually a really good counterpart to
yeah,
Bowie coming because obviously Bowie's like a huge star, right? So when
yeah,
you have him come in, you're like, oh my word, that's kind of crazy alone that
yeah,
they have him in this film.
yeah,
But I love that the introduction before you even see Tesla
yeah,
is you get Andy Serkis, and I was reminded again that he was, and I was like, oh yes. What
yeah,
great casting. Honestly, it's like all of it is like such fantastic casting. They bring him in and
yeah,
immediately he's like this totally great character that you get and you really want more of him. And they, sure enough, they deliver and you do get more of his character, which
yeah,
is good. And all like that whole piece where they do the introduction to how Tesla works and
yeah,
there's a sense of eeriness around the town and
yeah,
all that's kind of happening, and it's keying you up for basically, all the ominous talk about the machine and that
yeah,
it's a terrible crux and you shouldn't use it and you have no idea what it's going to
yeah.
do
The
to your life.
cost, yeah,
Yeah, like, have you
yeah,
considered the cost? That line, all of that stuff is
yeah.
love it. I just really
Really
love
good.
it because with the knowledge of what is coming, I think it's so much more kind of like, oh my goodness, this is it's great. It's great because you want to kind of shout to the characters and say, This is just
Yeah,
bad idea."
this is bad. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah,
it's the obsession is what drives them.
yeah,
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there's definitely that element that Circus, in his role, he's kind of the loud one, and
yeah,
then Bowie's kind of much more reserved as Tesla. But he plays it so well as Tesla because you can see that, or he kind of portrays that kind of melancholy, almost that pain that he's experienced. He knows the cost
yes,
for
yeah.
himself. He has experienced it, and you kind of get that in his eyes almost. And Angie is just he doesn't care. he's just like no, just,
He's gone so far
he
down
has. That's the
that
thing. He's
road
gone
already.
so far down. He's not turning back now.
I think when he's basically at a point where he says, I'm where he didn't even care when you get that scene of the bullet catch, and he loads the gun, and he knows he has every intention, doesn't he? I mean,
Yeah,
you can see the pain, um, like behind his face. You can see that, like,
yeah,
effectively he's welling up as he's holding the gun, and but he has every intention to shoot him, and he does not care.
yeah.
He knows that he has a family, all of the rest of that. It doesn't bother him at all. He's
No.
just he wants revenge so badly for
Do you know
what
what
he.
I love about that scene as well? Just before it, you have the
Yeah,
picture of the hand and the bullet, and the person can't. You don't know who it is. You just see the hand going over the other hand, and sort of mysteriously the bullet disappears, and then it reappears on the hand. And
isn't it meant to be Angiers?
well,
Isn't
yeah,
it?
it is, but you don't know that
Yes.
until the volunteer comes up, and then you know. Oh wait a second,
Yeah.
that's not going to be any old
And
volunteer.
they deliberately, every time they do those bits where they sabotage the person, almost always, I think you know it's going to be that person, but you never see. They
Yeah,
deliberately don't show the person, do they?
yeah,
So the
definitely.
reveal happens as the other character is seeing.
Yeah, there's a level of that, isn't there? All right, it's just before the other person realizes it. So as viewers, we're not quite, you know, ahead. We're only just ahead
Yes,
of the
yeah, and it's
of
kind of
the
shrouded in mystery up
characters.
until the point. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
hundred
that. I
percent.
do. I love that.
Yeah. Um, one other bit of casting that I love particularly is Michael Caine as Cutter. I think I would have to check, but I think it must be out of all Nolan's films the most prominent he is.
Mm.
He's in this a lot, and he is flipping brilliant.
Well, I mean,
Um,
he's often voicing those moments as well, isn't he? So
yeah,
he's a narrator of sorts in it, as well
yeah,
as you getting some quite key and pivotal scenes in it, and him
yeah,
breaking down, the more, I suppose, essentially a bit more the horror type nature behind some of the actions that the characters are taking.
yeah. He kind of takes the moral standard a lot of the time within the
He's like the
film.
moral anchor, isn't he? I think
Yeah,
throughout the film. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that kind of sums up near the end, doesn't he? Where he kind of actually he gets Borden's daughter back. Um,
Even
so
though throughout the film he essentially works with
I know.
Angiers, and I was interested, right? I don't know how you felt, but I think one of the first times I watched this film, I think you get a sense that you're in one person's camp or the other. You're kind of rooting for a character. I certainly felt like that the first time I watched it,
Yeah,
and I think the tendency is often it feels like the film says, well, you should side with Hugh Jackman's character, that you're, I think, more so because he
yeah,
seems more likable, and because of what happens to his wife at the beginning of the film, you're like, well,
yeah.
it's not
Hundred
fair.
percent. Yeah,
He's been wronged. But then as he goes down his dark path and he can't accept anything else, he becomes quite an unlikable character as time
yeah.
goes on.
I think
I
you have
think,
the bit with the books, don't you? With the journals, where obviously Angiers is reading Borden's journal, but we get to that moment where actually it's all been a bit of a lie, or
yeah,
he's intended for him to read this. and that's when you kind of go, well, the scenes that I've been seeing, how much of that is real? And then Angiers does the same trick to him
Yeah.
when he's in prison. The journal was given to him, and it kind of feels worse the second time round, almost. You know what I mean? Like, to have been dealt that trick, to not just to do it back to a
Yeah.
man who's in prison.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely it's salt in the wounds, isn't it? Because
But
there's
it's
an element he's
isn't
already
it all
been.
of it kind of it's quite interesting because I love the little I was like looking into almost all the little details, and he talks about when he's reading Borden's journal, he says he talks about his mind being divided, and he says
Yeah,
it's like he's reading the literal stuff, like he's reading the literal secret essentially
yeah,
in his
it's
own
there.
diary and doesn't see it, but that he says it's almost like two people
Yeah,
that's writing in the same thing.
yeah,
And I love that because it's like this whole duality of personality coming through in the writing.
yeah,
Um, and I think like tiny details like that almost kind of make it even better. But I agree, the sting, because you don't know who sets him on the quest, you don't know which of the personalities is like which of the people essentially is
yeah,
sending him on the quest to see Tesla. And then yes, when he's reading his journal and he's like, you're awaiting your sentence in jail
yeah,
for my murder, for my death. And he's like, oh, my mind blown.
yeah. And I think actually, ultimately, at the end, where you know that he, he, who he really is, he's this lord, and he isn't particularly nice. I don't think Hugh Jackman actually has he been putting on an act the whole time. You know, obviously the accent. He's not American. He's English,
Yeah.
and the charm that we've been seeing the whole time isn't really there. When he's talking
Yeah.
to Cutter, he's kind of not really the same person, um, which is interesting because actually Borden is more like that anyway.
Yes, yes.
Even though he's kind of there's two of them trying to pretend to be the one person. Actually, he was kind of a bit rude and a bit blunt. Um, so I mean,
See,
it's really fascinating when you stop and think about these characters
yeah,
and the nuances in them and the layers. And that's what's so good about this song. It's the layers, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
layers of the characters, the layers of their relationships with the different people. I mean, the Scarlett Johansson's character Olivia, how she's with Angiers, and then she kind of is sent on this task by Angiers, but is she being true to him or not when she's with Borden? And then obviously you find out that they have a romantic relationship,
hmm,
Borden and her. And it's just so interesting how these characters are kind of put against each other as rivals, but there are some really distinct similarities at different points.
yes, definitely.
That's part of the fun. And I mean, this is the interesting thing. I mean, I was trying to think about Nolan's films up to this point. We don't really have an original Nolan film by this point. So
Mm.
this is based on a book, Christopher Priest, which I've not read. My brother's read it. He says it's really good.
Mm.
Um, but before that, Batman Begins. Yeah, I mean it's based on a lot of unoriginal ideas, aren't they? They're not his.
Yeah,
And obviously, Insomnia, which I love, is a remake. So it's interesting for me to sort of wonder how much of this. Obviously, Nolan is telling the story in a certain way that is just completely enthralling, and it keeps
yeah,
you on your edge of your seat the whole time. But I just thought it was interesting how. Um, Actually, I've forgotten Memento, haven't I?
yeah. See,
That's the one. I mean, that one is totally original, and that plays with time because obviously it's played in
oh,
reverse.
yeah, and in a big way, obviously, yeah,
There's an element that Nolan is doing that here as well when they're
yes,
reading the journals. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting to me, how much he uses the original source material
mm.
to sort of tell his story.
Yeah,
That kind of fascinates me. Um,
It's about his. I think it's about the performances he gets out of the actors. He's really it's bringing something else to the table. I guess what I was thinking, like while we were chatting, also about how the characters are similar. I mean that there's a massive level of tragedy with Borden's character, right? You see his life is breaking down in front of your eyes, basically, because he has the tragic relationship with his wife, where essentially towards the end of the film, she then kills herself because
Yeah,
she cannot deal with the idea of effectively not knowing her husband or not knowing,
yeah,
he seems like one person from one day to the next, which we absolutely know the reason why that is, but
yeah,
she doesn't know, and she can't handle all of the secrets, and it just becomes too much. I mean, and from speaking from the perspective, I know we've said before, but speaking from the perspective of having a family myself, and you as yourself, I think the idea of being that low that you would leave your child behind because you're saying, I can't see a way out. It's
mm,
very That's what I mean about this film having like those really truly dark elements, because I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that's very dark, and it almost seems at like the point where you see the very clear divide in the two personalities for Borden. Like, I say the two personalities because it seems like they're the same character, but they're not. But like the twins, like one very much cares and one seemingly doesn't care, and it's like
yeah,
the quote evil part
yeah,
is the one that dies off, and then in the same way that we see with Angia's character with the uncovering of the machine, Tesla's machine, which essentially is cloning the character. And he says at the end of the film, he's like, "You don't know what it was. You don't know what it's like. How I felt. Was I going to be? Am I the man stepping into the machine, or am I the prestige? Am I the person that is
yeah,
coming out the other side?" Because in
yeah,
the very first instance, when we see the flashback, he uses the machine and he panics and just shoots the duplicate that comes
yeah,
out of the machine.
yeah,
And and I think, like when we see the very end, and you're saying how different his character is, part of me just feels, well, maybe it's the fact that he endlessly clones himself, because he does like 100 of these shows, and
yeah.
it's
And we don't know at what point Borden goes in, do we? He's obviously done a few at
yeah,
least,
and
and at the end, loads of those tanks.
yeah, and I think you just get the feeling that maybe it his humanity essentially just kind of
Yeah,
ebbs and tears away and dies away. I mean, obviously, it's a fabrication, but I think the idea essentially of someone just doing it's dark alone to imagine like
yeah.
stepping into the machine and then saying, well, this
Well, it's a bit
person's
like
gonna
The Fly, isn't it? That great David Cronenberg film. Uh,
amazing.
yeah, which is amazing, and I need to watch again because I haven't watched that in ages.
Oh man,
But
yeah,
yeah, definitely getting that too. Yeah, no, what I think this film's great. One thing that I think is really good as well is the soundtrack. Just it,
fantastic.
it is just great. It just builds the tension when you need it. It's not invasive. It is just purely there to serve the scenes and serve the dialogue and the interactions, which are great.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and actually, if you stop and listen to it, it's really good. Which is it's not an easy thing to do actually, to have a soundtrack that's kind of not invasive, but is actually still worth listening to.
yeah.
There's a fine balance. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's almost if we go to like another Christopher Nolan film, like Inception, for instance, I think Inception has a really brilliant soundtrack alone by itself, but
yeah,
it's one of those things that it's almost a character within the story.
yes, it is
Um,
because, but then that it's almost performing a function, isn't it?
yes,
That
yeah,
those when you hear that sound, you know something's happening. You
yeah,
know, actually, either the clock's ticking in a certain way,
yeah,
actually, or it's the kick is coming.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's about the movement of time, isn't it? And it kind of gives you those kind of signposts.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in this film, we're at a point before he's experimenting with music in that particular way. So he's not quite at that point yet. But
no,
I do think I entirely agree. It only serves to elevate everything else in the film. I think you're
yeah,
getting a sense of the tension is so wrought and felt in this film. Like at every
yeah,
moment, you're kind of like, oh, like
yeah.
you
And,
really
and for
feel
me
it.
as well, I mean, what his next film is The Dark Knight, and Hans Hans Zimmer in that film knows how to really get the tension up.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you're right. There's an element that in this film, what Nolan is trying to get out of his um, composer is that let's build tension, but in a way that doesn't invade,
yes,
doesn't
yeah,
impose too much, that we get that balance right. And yeah, I mean, for me, Hans Zimmer is the next level
yes.
in terms of composing, but that's probably another episode. About some of those other Nolans. I was just having a little look at. So I think Memento is based on a short story by his brother Jonathan.
Wow, I didn't know that.
No, that's what it says.
That's great.
So
Love
his brother wrote a short story, and then Christopher Nolan adapted that short story into a screenplay. So, and actually, the Nolan brothers did the screenplay for The Prestige. I mean, these guys are seriously talented.
that. Yeah, unbelievably so. Definitely.
Um, Anything more you want to say about this bad boy?
I mean, other than the fact that if you've kind of watched through the whole of this and you haven't watched it and you didn't take our advice at the beginning and we completely ruined it for you, I do apologize.
Yeah,
But it, like this film for me, just gets better and better every time I watch
yeah.
it. I find it very hard to kind of find anything that I just don't like about it. I will say, actually, the one thing I did
Okay.
notice upon this viewing is what accent is Scarlett Johansson doing?
So I was going to say she. Not all the time. There's a few scenes where she's fine,
Yeah, a few.
but occasionally I guess she's trying to be a bit Cockney, isn't she? A little bit
A
Cockney.
little bit, yeah.
Certainly Southern English. Yeah,
Because
bless
it's
her. She is great.
sometimes it's.
I think she's great. But
Don't get me wrong. Her performance is great.
yeah,
I think, and also the character is needed because it's like the bridging gap at that certain point in the film between the two characters. The characters themselves don't really meet, do they, per
no.
se, unless they're having those moments where they're invading one another's shows.
Hmm.
But I think just like that accent, I was like, what is going on here? It's
Hmm.
like it's jumping in places
Yeah,
a bit
that
weirdly.
is the only down point. But I think
I mean, that's yeah. Otherwise than that, I
I'm
think,
happy to overlook that. To be honest,
of course,
I
and I
imagine Americans watching that film probably don't even notice.
probably not. I doubt it
um,
very much.
no, it's true. But
But
yeah,
yes, yeah. What about your final thoughts on it, Dan?
well, I was just trying to think about great moments, and this film has a heap of great moments,
It
doesn't it?
does. It does.
I mean, I was just thinking about that moment where Angiers has been to Seaboard and show he's gone to see his trick, and Olivia's asking him, "How's the show?" And he's just bowled over because he can't work it out, and that's just a great moment. Obviously, the moment where you see the machine in action at the end is great. I think probably all of those reveal moments. Um, but yeah, there's just so many moments for a film to have so many moments where you go, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
wasn't that moment great?"
like iconic moments, essentially,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
bits of
definitely.
dialogue where they talk
Yeah,
about when they're talking about magic and they say,
yeah,
well, like I think I can't remember which character it is, but someone says, um, it's very rare that you see actual real
Yes,
magic
isn't
like
that
that.
brilliant? And
That
he's
moment.
about to say, "I haven't seen something like that," and then he's cut off. I think, and you
Yeah.
almost want to go, "Well, what's he about to say?"
I know.
You know, when was the
And,
last
he,
time you saw real magic? You
and
know,
then he says something that he says you have to dress it up a little
yeah,
bit, doesn't he? So you have to dress it up. You have to make them, uh,
make them believe it might not
make
be
them,
real. Yeah,
yeah, make them
yeah,
doubt it or something like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah,
You've got to give them enough reason to doubt.
yeah.
And yeah, wow.
And also, I will say the one line that sends shivers down my spine every single time I watch it. It's it's horrendous, but it's really fantastic. Total great delivery by Michael Caine when he says, "I once told you that drowning is like going home." Doesn't he? Does he say like going home? And he said,
Yeah,
and then he says that he lied. And he said it's like, what is he? I can't
it's
remember what he says
it's it's
instead.
agony. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. And then it totally, oh my word, it sends like shockwaves back because you think
yeah.
like, what is that doing to his brain? Then suddenly, because he realizes he basically has murdered himself like
Mm.
multiple times, like
And
in the
what's
most,
interesting as well, yeah, that it's really close to the moment where Borden's hung,
yeah,
and there's that mirroring of, she's drowned, he's hung, and they're although they're different, there's a similarity in
yeah,
many ways with them dying because you can't breathe. It's part of it,
yeah,
and that agony, and he will think, oh, you know, and there's that inner agony that he's been going through the whole time, and that almost sums up both of those characters, Borden and Angiers.
yeah,
That agonize, that obsession has caused them to feel agony the whole time,
yeah,
basically,
yeah,
and they're trying to escape that feeling.
yeah.
Um, yeah, great. I agree. I think there's some amazing bits of dialogue. I'm just trying to quickly find some quotes, just see if there's any others. But yeah, obviously that bit where he's hung and he says any last words, and he
Oh, is
says
that,
that
are you watching
abracadabra.
carefully?
That's just like, yeah, that bit where he's like, says it to the guard. It's like, oh no. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, it's
they've
that whole thing as well when they talk about the secret impresses no one,
yeah, yes.
and
He
actually,
says, what does he say? They'll flatter you for you. They'll flatter you. They'll beg you for it. But once you give it up, you're nothing.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that, and he holds so true to
it's
that
great.
belief, doesn't he? He's like, I will, he ultimately like causes his wife to commit suicide
Yeah, yeah.
because he holds so true to that thought, which is just nuts, and that's
Which I
part of the
think,
obsession.
yeah, you get the suffering of both characters, don't you? Completely. But then in a way, I suppose you do get a happy ending in this film because you
Yeah,
get the father reunited with his child, and there's a
which
sense of
actually mirrors Inception a bit, doesn't it?
yes, yeah,
Actually, I hadn't thought of that
yeah,
because
it
he
does.
kind of, well, whether he's really there or whether he's dreaming.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
it's nice. I think it's nice. There's a
there's some resolving of the story there, isn't there? To a point.
yeah, yeah. There is.
But
Even though
doesn't there something in the back of your mind? You think, is there another Angiers just running around? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
he kept another one back. In
yeah,
fairness, you had
I
no idea.
win, I win. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I loved watching it again. Great,
yeah.
fantastic.
So, dare I ask the impossible question? Where do you rank this in Nolan's films? It's the impossible question.
It is an impossible question. I think it's for me. It's definitely one of the higher ones. Definitely,
Top five,
yeah, easily.
top three.
Yeah, probably because I think mainly
With
because
what? What's your other two? Come on, I'm putting you on the pressure here.
you're putting the pressure on now. I don't know if
Because
I'd have
I've
to
got
think.
you cornered now, Brendan. Because whatever two you say, I will say something else and go, "What about this one?"
You have to have me go first to just make it even more
Yeah.
awkward.
Oh, I get to ask the questions here, Brendan.
That's true. You do. You're running the show,
I'm
so
running this show.
it's fine.
Yeah, it's hard not to put this in his top three if you
Yeah,
stop and think. But my word, I love all his films personally, so
yeah,
it's really hard. And I would not blame anyone if I said, "What's your favourite film?" and they said The Prestige. I would want to shake their hand
yeah.
and go, "Brilliant choice."
I
You
mean, as
know,
I said at the beginning, I think because it's got that whole thing of it's making you, it's just making you kind of all the thoughts that are going through, you're rushing through your head as you're watching it, and then immediately afterwards, I watched it with my wife, and I felt like afterwards I just had to. I had to talk about it, and I was so happy she had questions and was asking me questions about it. Because, like, I would love to answer all your
yes.
questions.
Have you got any more questions? What's the time? 12:30 in the evening. I need
More
to get
things
up in a
you'd
few
like to
hours.
talk about? I'm happy to help.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah,
I
but
think we're going to have to call it a day
that's
because I
yeah,
think we could talk about this film and about Christopher Nolan a lot.
yeah.
It's not too long till Tenet might come out at the cinema.
Maybe.
Who knows? I've noticed the cinema near me has released their showings and their
Wow, that's brave.
um, yes, the Curzon in Canterbury is one of the first Curzon cinemas to open. So,
Wow.
oddly enough, it's showing a lot of the films that were on when lockdown kicked in, which I kind of feel like it's a bit of a random thing, but
Yeah.
you got to put something on, I guess. And one of them was Parasite. So, if
Not
anyone's
so
in the
bad.
Canterbury area, make advantage of that one because it's amazing. Um, so yes, we'll see Tenet soon, and I'm sure we'll then struggle to find another 5-star film to put in our top three from Nolan.
Yeah,
And yes, so happy viewings this week, Brendan.
agreed. Very
Agreed.
happy days.
Now, I think we decided on next week's review already.
Have we?
Did we not decide on The Old Guard on
We
Netflix?
did. We did.
So that will be our episode next week. So if you want to watch it, you can watch it and then listen to us talk about it. So there
It's
you
great.
go. If you haven't seen it already, you can watch that and hear our thoughts next week. Brendan, it's been a pleasure.
Always Dan, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I'm sure there's something else we could have said about this film.
There's probably a multitude of things we could have said about this film.
Put it in the comments. Put it in the comments. So check out
Absolutely.
YouTube. We've got Twitter. We've got Instagram. If you want to check out this guy's amazing artistic efforts.
Very kind.
Yes, we have our own little character, Screenhead,
Mm-hmm.
don't we? So
We
we'll,
do.
if you want to check out him, go and have a look at Brendan's work, and we'll see you next time on A Shot Between the Reels. Bye bye.
See you later.
Cheerio, old boy.